We acknowledge that we were founded on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaronk, the Mississauga and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and now live on land that is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We have many representatives working across this land now known as Ontario, and we acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory. We are grateful to be able to work and live on this land and thankful to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. To continue to center reconciliation, we encourage our team, partners, students, and teachers to take time to learn about the lands they are currently on. Visit native-land.ca for more information.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual field trip. We're so excited to have teachers and students from across Ontario joining us for this special event celebrating Canadian Agriculture Literacy Month. My name is Madison, and I'm your host from Eggscape today. I'd love to see where everyone is this morning, so feel free to put in the chat where you're tuning in from. And I see a lot of you are already doing that, so hello. Okay, so today we're going to be taking on a sweet adventure to Backwoods Maple in Coldwater, Ontario. Feel free to look that up on a map to see how close that is to you. We're going to get a first-hand look at how delicious maple syrup is made, all the way from getting the sap from the tree till it's in a finished maple syrup bottle and put on the shelf for you to buy. And here is an example of our maple syrup that we're going to be learning about from Backwoods. So we did have a question from students from MOD asking, are there other areas in the world that make maple syrup? Well, maple syrup is a product that's very dear to us as it's something very special to our area of the world. So I'm going to put up a map here for you to see. So as you can see on this map, this is where the sugar maple trees grow, and it is a large part of Ontario, some of Quebec, and some of the United States as well. So aren't we special that we get maple syrup growing in our area? So make sure you send in your questions into the chat for our host to answer. And a big shout out to the students in Miss Baird's grade 2 class, Mrs. Kerner's, Miss Rodrilla's Fantastic Four, Laurentian Ace, West Rouge JPS, Miss Thackeray's class, 7B Giverson, Miss Henry's class, KB Elma Township Public School MOD, and Madame Hayrink's class, and Cedar Hollow Kindergarten class for sending in some questions ahead of time. So hopefully we can get to some of them. Also, for a chance to win some delicious maple syrup suckers that we'll be learning about today, make sure to send in photos of your class participating using the link in your email. Well, we're thrilled today to have Paul, the owner of Backwoods Maple, as our expert guide today. He's been running his operations since 2006 and manages an incredible network of pipelines. And here he is. I'll pass it over to Paul to introduce himself and the sugar bush and take us on our tour.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you having me on today. I'd like to give you a little background on myself first. Back in 1970, I learned to make maple syrup with my dad on his farm. And as I grew up, I got away from it for a while. And then I had my own family and my two sons and their dear friend, Corey Vandergeest. We went into partnership and started Backwoods in 2006. So we started with 40 buckets that year, and now we've grown to 6,000 taps now in our bush. We have our bushes, trees are spread out over 130 acres, and it's fully pipelined. So traditionally, you'll see a lot of people collecting sap with buckets, which we have here that you would hang on a tree. And there's the spile that you would use. And And here's the drill. So you would drill a hole into your tree on a slight upward angle. Once you've drilled down into about 2 inches, you would take this spile here, tap it into the tree, and then you would hang your bucket, and the sap will run down the spout and into your bucket. Madison, I believe you had a picture on screen showing that. So that when it's running that hard, you can get a couple buckets worth of sap from each tree when it's running like that. So it has to be collected. That's a big job. Lots of heavy lifting and whatnot. So we couldn't possibly do that for 6,000 taps. So our bush is full of pipeline. Maybe pull that up to Madison, please. So you can see there the tap in the tree. There's a white little spile on the top there and a line going down to another line. And they join together. So this is what it actually looks like. So there is the spile that we tap into the tree after we drill the hole. That tip goes into the tree. The sap runs down the line. And then there's a T there. There'll be more line coming across into there and carry on down to the next tree. And from there, it'll go into bigger lines. And gradually makes it down so you can see it going down, and then there's a bigger 1-inch line down in between there. And then that'll just make its way all the way down through the bush. And it's on a vacuum. For you, those that don't know what a vacuum system is, it's basically, it's like when you're drinking a soda pop with a straw. You suck up on the straw and up comes your soda. We're doing the same thing with the sucking on the line. It pulls the sap down the line all out of the trees all the way back to our tanks. Some of our sap actually travels about 2 kilometers before it actually makes it to the shack. So it travels quite a ways through a lot of pipeline. We have throughout the bush, it's kind of like a spider web of big line and small line. We have over 100 kilometers of pipe, if you can imagine that, in the bush. Lots of pipe. For those that are wondering, where does sap come from? Well, sap, the maple tree, its food is the sap for the leaves. So come spring, so to grow the new sets of leaves. So during the fall and winter, the taproots start collecting up starch in the ground and all the minerals. And then come spring, when things start to thaw out, the water starts coming up through the trees, through the wood, grabs that starch and transmits it into a sugary base, and then it makes its way to the leaves and grow the new leaves. So our job is to borrow some of that sap to make our syrup. Now, a tree, in order to be large enough to be able to do that, needs to be roughly 30 to 40 years old before we can tap it. So it can then spare some sap for us. Sap in the tree is only 2 to 3% sugar base. The rest is water. So some people had asked the question, why does it freeze? Well, it's basically water. 98% of the sap is water, so it needs to warm up in order to flow. So that sap comes into our sugar shack. From there, we run it through filters and clean it all up nice. And we actually run it through a reverse osmosis that helps get rid of a bunch of the water out of the system because it takes a long time to boil it down. For instance, this bucket here, if you wanted to fill that bucket full of syrup, I would need 40 of these in sap boiled down to make 1 bucket of syrup. So it takes all day to boil down that sap and get enough to make syrup. So it's basically evaporate as you boiling the sap, it evaporates the water out of it. It caramelizes the sugar, and then you get that delicious golden looking syrup. And after we do that, we run it through filter presses and then into our stainless steel barrels. And we store it for collection before we bottle.
Awesome, Paul. I'm just going to jump in here just because we have a lot of great questions already. And maybe we can do some questions on sap and tapping trees and things like that. And then we can get into seeing more of the machinery and the process that you have in your sugar bush. So why don't we put up a question here for you to answer?
Okay.
Okay. Have any animals ever gotten into your lines, like bitten them?
Yes, we have. We've had bears chew on the line. I guess they're attracted to the sweetness in the line. Red squirrels like to chew the lines. And we've had moose in our bush and deer. They've been pretty good. Sometimes they can get into the lines and tear them down if they get tangled in them. So that's a bit of an issue. But we are pretty lucky, really, throughout the season. But we do have to repair it once in a while.
That would be quite something, seeing a bear. We have another question from West Rouge JPS. Who or where do you export your maple syrup product to?
Mostly just in Ontario, in our area, mostly in north of Toronto. We do ship some stuff to the States, depending on, and actually into Europe, but it's usually a special order that customers have ordered, special bottles type of thing. But most of ours is done locally through our food lands, our little country stores, and we do supply syrup to maple syrup or vegetable farm stands, and Muskoka granola. They make granola. They buy a lot of syrup from us to make the granola.
Awesome. We have a question from Miss Henry's class. How long does it take to make the maple syrup that goes in our bottles and ready to eat?
Well, that's a good question. If you can imagine, if it's 98% water and you got to get it up to 67% sugar to be syrup, it takes a long time to boil. So it would take all day to make a batch of syrup, boiling it down.
Yes.
In our
Awesome.
fancy evaporator that you'll see when we do the tour, you'll see that it takes us about 3 hours from the time we start it till we're taking syrup off.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll save some of the questions for a little later on. If you want to continue on and show us around, that would be great.
Okay. Okay, so in our sugar shack here, there's our retail. Oh, I'm sorry, I got the camera going the wrong way here. I'll turn it around. There we are. Here is our retail area. So it's a little stand that's got all our products there ready to sell when you come in the door. And there's our coffee bar over there. And over there's my partner, Corey. And here's our evaporator. We'll come back to it in 1 second. So remember I told you that all our sap comes into big tanks from the bush. It gets pumped into this big tank that's directly in front of us here. That's the size of a swimming pool. If you can imagine that, how much sap's coming in there in a day. We'll fill that in 1 day. So it's a lot of sap to boil down. Then there's our reverse osmosis and filter machine. What it does is it's going to take 85% of the water out of the sap. So we have less to boil down. And up there is our big storage tanks. You can't see them through the railing too good, but they're big milk coolers. Once we're ready to boil, the sap runs down this big line along the wall. And then it's going to make its way over to the evaporator. It's going down the wall over here. And makes its way into the evaporator. You see in there, see the sap boiling away? That's the first stage. From there, it makes it through a series of pans. There's 3 different pans. See, it's already starting to get a golden color to it. It started out looking like a glass of water. In the front there, and then once the syrup is done, it's going to come out through this valve and into this tank. Once we get enough there, we'll run it through our filter press. You see the hose going through here and up into this machine. What this does, it's got a bunch of filters here, paper filters. It will, as the air is pushing the syrup through here, it will grab all the dirt and make it nice and clean and shiny. And from there, it goes down into our barrel, our stainless steel barrel. That holds 150 liters of syrup. It's actually 500 pounds when it's full. It's very heavy. So that'll be hot sealed. We put the cap on it after when it's full. That hot seals it. It's preserved. It's good for years that way. Every barrel that we do, we take a sample of it. Here's last year's little sample bottles. We take the samples. Here is the syrup that's going into the barrel, so we know what color we're getting. So they're fairly light, some of them, and then there's some darker ones. What causes the different darkness is the different bacteria in the tree at the time of the year. As it starts to warm up, the tree starts taking on natural bacteria. It's a healing process. I'll take you back inside now. So the healing process of the tree, it's kind of like when you get a cut on your arm, you start to scab over. The trees do the same thing. They still heal themselves. So the holes actually don't hurt the tree. A healthy tree will seal over again the next year. So here we are in my bottling room. Just give you a quick view. It's a clean room separate from everything else, so there's no dirt or anything. There's one of the barrels full of syrup. It's actually getting ready to, we're going to be pumping that up into our bottler. This is our bottling machine. It holds a full barrel. We bring it back up to bottling temperature, so it's preserved when it goes into the hot, packed into the bottles. So it's all preserved again. We also make lots of other products, like we make butter. This is our butter machine. Now it's all pure 100% maple syrup. All we have to do to make butter is we have to boil it down a lot further, and we chill it, and it becomes like a pot of taffy. If you can imagine what a big scoop of taffy would be like, it's delicious. But anyways, we pour it into this hopper here. and it starts churning through the machine. It'll go through a churner down below, goes back up the pipe and back into the hopper. And it just keeps going around in a circle like that until it churns it and makes it look like butter. They call it maple butter, but there's no dairy product in it. It's 100% maple syrup. And then when we get the right consistency, we just turn the valve and it allows it out, and then bottle it right there. It's just like kind of like honey, nice and creamy, sweet and delicious. It's great on toast. We also have a candy machine. Similar thing, same thing. We have to boil the syrup down up to a certain temperature to make it thicker, and then we dump it into here. We open a valve, let it into the auger, and what it does is it's churning, and it turns it into like a sugary base. And Madison, I believe you have on a video of the machine actually working with the candy coming out of it. Can you hear me okay?
Awesome. Yeah, I can hear you. I just
Okay.
put up that video of the candy being made there, coming out of the machine. So they just saw it. And then I can also put up the photo of the trays, the finished trays.
Yes, if you could, that'd be great. So after the candy, once it pours into those molds, it actually starts to harden. And we leave it for 24 hours. And then we take it out of the trays, and then we dip it in a syrup bath again. And they're on the trays now drying. And they're delicious pure maple syrup sugar candies. They're absolutely delicious. So once they're dried, we'll put them into packaging. Now the suckers that you have that you've seen on display, here's actually the mold. It's clear plastic. Sorry if you can't really see it very good. What we have to do is we have to boil the syrup up to a temperature of 300 degrees, and then we pour it into the mold. And as it's cooling, it'll harden into that sucker. And after our molds are all full, we usually have a little bit left. This is something you could try at home. You try boiling syrup to 300 degrees, let it cool down for about 10 degrees, and then pour it out on some parchment paper, and it'll be like a pool of syrup. And then you can, as it's cooling, you can take a knife and just cut it into little squares. And once it's completely hard, you can break it up and you have yourself little candies. That's something you can try at home. But just remember, it's very hot when you're boiling. You don't want to get it on your hands. We also make a maple sugar. So you can actually, it's like a brown sugar in a way, but it's made of pure maple syrup. So you can put that in your coffee, teas, or bake with it, make butter tarts, all kinds of stuff with it. Here's some of the products that we have. So we have a 4 liter, 2 liter, 1 liter, and 500 mils in plastic. And there's what the glass ones look like. They're really nice. They display the syrup really nice. Some other products we make with maple syrup. There's a blueberry syrup that's actually sweetened with maple syrup. We have a maple sweet mustard. We have a maple barbecue sauce. There's a maple habanero hot sauce and a maple smoke hot sauce. They're all sweetened naturally with maple syrup. here are the bags of granola that different flavors: cranberry, cashew, and pistachio. That from Muskoka granola.
I think we had a class actually that put in the comments that they love Muskoka granola. So you have some fans of your maple syrup in the granola watching right now.
Yeah, they're great people at Muskoka granola. They're really nice people. I really enjoy dealing with them.
That's awesome. These all look so delicious, and I'm sure everyone watching definitely wants to try some of the maple syrup. And if you have not tried maple syrup before, highly recommend trying it. It is delicious. And yeah, as you can see, it's a labor of love. There's lots of machines that go into it, some not so much, depends where you get your maple syrup. But yeah, quite the labor of love for sure. We have a lot of questions for you, Paul. I was wondering if we could go into some of them.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. So this question is, what tools do you use to be able to tell when the syrup has enough sugar to be ready to put in bottles?
We use a couple things. We use a thermometer. Maple syrup or the sap, when you're boiling it down, becomes maple syrup when it reaches a temperature of 7 degrees above boiling water temperature. So you boil a kettle of water and measure the temperature of it. And because some days water actually doesn't boil at 212, it could be a little less, it could be more, depending on the barometric pressure. So we have to gauge what the water's doing that day, and we add 7 degrees to it. And that's our temperature we take the syrup off at. And we also have what they call a refractometer, and it measures sugar content in it. It's done electronically. That's our backup.
Very cool. You definitely have a lot of technology there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Another question here is, how does the syrup not stick to the pipelines?
Well, it doesn't stick to the pipelines because at that stage, when it's going through the pipeline, it's mostly water. There, like you say, it's just tastes like sweet water, really. It's not very sugary, so it's not sticky. What will happen though, as the weather warms up, bacteria will grow, and that's what stops the season. When it stays above freezing for a week or so and gets too warm during the day, the bacteria, the healing process starts happening naturally. The trees dry up, and the sap that's left in the lines can then spoil and turn sour. So what we have to do is we go to every tree, we take the spile back out of the tree, and we squirt some, it's an alcohol base, goes in each tap, and the vacuum sucks it down the line and cleans the line before we store it for the summer. So it gets rid of all the bacteria and stuff. And then that's capped off and stays like that for the summer. Our lines all stay in the bush year round. They don't come down.
Makes sense. That would be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's do another question here. Why is some of the maple syrup dark and why is some of it light? And I'm curious, do they taste different too?
Yeah, actually, and everybody has their own taste buds. Some like the dark, some like the amber, just depending on what you're doing with it too. Some people like to cook with the dark because it's got a stronger maple flavor to it. Really what causes it is just the time of year. Say we get where the weather warms up during the day and freezes every night, and then the next day freezes and thaws. It usually gives you a consistent color base and will stay maybe at an amber color or a golden color. As the season gets on, the bacteria in the tree starts to grow a bit, and you start getting the sap is not as clear anymore. It starts to get a little cloudy. And that's what creates that delicious maple strong flavor. And you see, it's whatever really Mother Nature gives us for weather is what we get for color sap. It's nothing that we can control. We just get what is given to us.
I like that. Awesome. Let's do another question here. This is coming from Mrs. Crawford's grade 4-5. What is the ratio of sap to syrup?
That's an excellent question. Actually, I was going to come to that. So the ratio is approximately 40-1 on average. So some trees will give you 2% sugar, some will give you 3% or maybe even higher. But on an average, it's about a 40-1 ratio. So 40 buckets of sap to make 1 bucket of syrup is really what it is. To give you an idea, last year we made 12,000 liters of syrup. In order to make the 12,000 liters of syrup, we had to collect 480,000 liters of sap. A lot of sap had to be boiled down to make the syrup. So we had to, that's many, many swimming pools full of sap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's do, I think we have time for a couple more questions, but then unfortunately our time has already come up and we'll have to say goodbye. But for now, we have a couple more. All right. Mrs. Godbout's class is wondering what happens to the tree after all the sap has been drained out. Does it produce new sap to drain again the same year?
So that is why we need a tree that's 30 to 40 years old. It's a bigger tree, so we can make about 2 liters of syrup per tree without hurting the tree. If you pick on a little tree, you'll end up taking too much sap and it may eventually die, actually. It makes it unhealthy. The leaves won't grow properly. And its future would not be long. But in the bigger trees, it's just kind of like humans. They give up blood, so much blood at a time, and it doesn't hurt them. It's the same with the trees.
That's pretty cool. And it's only a certain time of year, right, that you can do this. We can't go visit you in September and see sap coming out of the trees.
That's right. No, remember the process at the start was through the late fall and through the winter. That's when the tree is gathering up its minerals to make the sap to flow in the spring once it warms up. So it can't make sap during the summer. Everything goes to the leaves, and it would just spoil if you took it out of the tree.
Right. Awesome. Okay, let's do 2 more questions, and then we'll say goodbye. Okay. This one says, "Hi there. I'm watching with my preschool class, and they want to know how long it takes to boil the sap."
So I guess it really depends on what you're boiling with. Like if you're boiling on your barbecue, you have a pot sitting on your barbecue and boiling, it could take a couple days to get down. Depends on how much syrup you're trying to make and how much sap you're boiling down. But with our evaporator, you've seen after 3 hours, we will get some syrup off. Where if you're just doing it on a pot, it could take all day before you boil it down enough.
That makes sense. Great. Okay. And we'll do one final question here. Okay. Do you keep track of how old your trees are?
Well, the thing with the trees, we really don't keep track of them. We on how old they are. We check their health, if you get a tree that's damaged from wind, ice storm, stuff like that, that it's doing more harm than good by staying there, we have to cut it down. And then we measure a tree. We don't like to tap a tree that's anything under 8 inches. That's kind of the 30 to 40 year minimum size. So we just constantly are doing maintenance in the bush all summer. That's what we do in the summer on a sugar farm. We have to do maintenance in the bush. So we don't just boil in the spring and then we take the rest of the year off. It's a full-time job. We're bottling all summer at our sugar shack too and making candy. I made suckers till like 11:30 last night. So it's a full-time busy job.
Amazing. Yeah, and I guess I have one last question myself. For those watching that might be interested in maple syrup or maybe helping out or learning how to make more, just curious how I guess they could get into what you do.
Well, I would be more than willing if they wanted to drop me a line and to our email address, a question on how to make things. We could respond back with a recipe for them. I'd be glad to do that for you. I think you'll find in the maple syrup business, any producer loves to share how we make stuff. We're not, it's not hidden. We like to, we have a lot of pride in our products and like to tell people how to make it.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for showing us around Backwoods Maple. And I know we don't have that much time and we had a lot of questions. So thank you everyone for sending in your questions. We had a great time looking around and learning how maple syrup is made. And if you want to continue learning, definitely do that in your classroom. We have an activity kit for you to use afterwards that will help you continue learning because we can't go over everything in our short period of time here. Before we say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to say to these students, Paul, before we say goodbye?
I would just say if you've got a tree in your yard, a maple tree, a couple, 2 or 3 trees, get a couple buckets and try it. If you've never tried it before, and you'll probably fall in love with it just like I did when I was a kid. That's why I'm doing it today. It's maple syrup is the first product, agricultural product of the year to be harvested, and it's at a nice time of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great way to get outside, get some exercise, collecting all that sap. That's great. Thank you so much. And everyone, do not forget to send in those photos of you doing an activity or watching our virtual field trip if you want a chance to win 30 of our maple syrup suckers from Backwoods that you saw being made. They are delicious, so definitely do that. And we also have a lot more programs going on for Canadian Agriculture Literacy Month, so please check out our website and see what else we're doing this month. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much, Paul, for taking us around. And we hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Bye, everyone.